sometimes you will be presenting at conferences that try to keep the budget down, and because of that, they may not provide the technology. So what are other ways in order for you to still be successful at presenting if you don't have the technology yourself? Because I try to contact people at SU and they don't have computers that they can lend out, or they don't, and I know other institutions do. So that was something, that was a road bump that I hadn't experienced before, because at all the other institutions I had been at, they provided that technology for you. So they would have the computer, they would have the projector, they would have everything for you to, present.
Yeah, I would say definitely ask questions about the technology like way in advance, because it's one of those things that you just don't want to have to deal with when you show up and you're already kind of nervous, and then you have to worry about, like, does my computer work with this system and everything? And I know definitely a lot of people are having issues with Macs and getting the adapters and everything. And I know what Esther and I did was we made sure to, talk with the tech people the day before our presentations, just to, know where they were and have a phone number in case something went wrong. And the tech support at ACPA was pretty great, actually, and everything worked out fine, but it's definitely extra stress.
I think for me, the biggest thing that was for the regional conference that I was at was the spacing of the room. We had asked for kind of roundtable discussion set up, but they had it set up with like lecture style, which and the way that the conference was the schedule, it was kind of like in and out, like between, it was like 5 minutes between each session, because it was a really small conference, and we didn't really have enough time to like move all the chairs, and so that kind of was a bump that we didn't really expect to, but it ended up being fine. People just turned around and they made it work, but it wasn't sort of how we wanted it to be set up for because of our discussion. So that was kind of the biggest hurdle that we had to deal with when I was there. But no technology mishaps, which was nice.
One thing I will say that I've actually experienced at a lot of conferences is that some rooms are set up with microphones and some aren't. And so if you're in the room without a microphone, then you find yourself yelling. So at the end of your workshop, your voice is gone, and that's what happened to me this last time. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind is they ask you, your workshop is in blah 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 days. Do you have any questions for us? I would ask that, is there going to be a microphone or whatever available?
I was wondering if anyone can talk to this kind of collaborative process of presenting in terms of if you have multiple presenters, both on campus, like people you're presenting with from the same institution, or if anyone also has experience in collaborating with individuals from other institutions, what worked, what didn't work, lessons learned, things like that.
I've seen some really, I haven't personally done this, but I've seen some really cool presentations where people will take a topic that's a hot topic, and then they'll do different institutions' perspective, which is kind of nice because then it doesn't really involve a lot of working together ahead of time, which can be stressful when you work full time. And so each school will just say, oh, this is how we handle the issue, and then the next school will say that, and then the next school will talk about how they handle it, and then at the end, they kind of just open up the room to how other people handle it, and it just becomes kind of a discussion.
I mean, to be honest with you, I like presenting alone. I think that it's a lot easier. You dictate the pace, you dictate the information, it's your presentation. So for me, it's a lot easier to present by myself. However, at Linfield, we used to present in 3, and so each person would stick to their topic that they were an expert in. So I did the multicultural enrollment and retention, and then my colleague would do all the financial stuff. So that's the way we divided up the work, but for me, it's easier to just present by myself, less stressful.
I didn't think I would like presenting by myself better, but I have to agree, I liked just kind of the freedom that entailed, and you don't have to make eye contact with anyone and be like, how are we doing that time? You have total control over that, so I did like that. From my experience in undergrad, collaborating with grad students and faculty and presenting, the process obviously looked really different for me, but as far as preparing for the actual presentation, I just remember one of the grad students I was working with was like, write everything out beforehand, like, and this was like a very psychology research-based presentation where you have to hit all of these important points in order for it to make sense. So I think that might not be applicable to a lot of what we do in the field maybe, but so that was kind of how I went into these rounds of presentations, was just make sure that I have a solid outline of everything that I need to say, have it written down because I'm known to forget things when I'm presenting. So that was my process, my background experience, and then what I took going into this process. And then I kind of found that I could really just rely on myself to, like, I knew it and I kind of owned the information. So that was a really cool feeling to realize that I didn't need to necessarily go through that whole long tedious process.
For me, I did one of each. So I did it by myself at Rutgers and then with my student leader at Montana. And I like both. I found both to be interesting for me in different ways. I think one thing I'm looking forward to moving on next year into my full-time job is I would like to collaborate with my colleagues that maybe aren't at my institution, that are at different institutions, because that's something that I found to be interesting. At NASPA, I went to a couple sessions that were from like people from like Vermont and California and Texas. I'm like, how do they like come together and do this? But they really interested me, and so I'm interested in trying to do collaborative presentations with colleagues from different institutions. Because I think it's cool to at least try it, but I'm also interested in presenting by myself as well. So I kind of see both sides, and I'm interested in both sides, and so I hope to do that in the future.
What sort of assessment did you do of your presentation? And did the conference present something for you to just distribute, or did you plan and factor that in?
The conference I went to, they had like a little circuit that they gave out afterwards, and then they scan them in and send them to you like a week later, or not a week later, maybe like a few weeks later. But it's kind of nice to have that because then they'll tell you overall kind of how you did. And it's helpful too if you want to ever present at a national conference, if you do one at a regional, because then it shows like, people have liked it. So I think that's how we were able to get ours at the annual conference.
Yeah, sometimes I do it online and they forward all the information on to you. And then, but most of the time they have little paper things that people just fill out and then they provide them. I got them mailed for this last conference and they mailed them back to me. And that way I can receive the feedback.
They didn't do any assessment at ACPA or AERA.
At NODA, they did paper, and I received those in the mail about 2 or 3 weeks later of general feedback. So I didn't have to do any of that. And they told me when they sent that letter to accept, to approve the proposal, that they would provide assessment and that we could also do our own if we wanted to, but that it would be provided for us at the conference. So we didn't create space or time to do it for ourselves.
Would you create that space or time in the future? Or was the assessment that they provided adequate and helpful?
I probably would maybe do it on specifically more like our actual topic and what takeaways, because I think the at least the ones for NODA were very generic. Like, what presentation did you go to? What worked well? What didn't work well? Feedback for the presenters. So I think having more specific questions that kind of pinpointed to our actual topic could have been maybe more helpful. I don't know. I think so.
What I like doing is putting my information on whatever it may be on the board or whatever, so that people have access to it throughout the workshop. And at the end I say, if you want me to email you this presentation, I will email it to you. And that always works really well because then after the presentation, they come up to me and they have questions, or they are really like, I think that's the best part is when you present and you have a line of people waiting to speak to you, and it makes you feel so good. You're like, yeah, I presented on something good and I did a good job on it. And so I think that's the type of assessment I take in, so I know that when people leave right away, then it may not have been as engaging as I wish it would have.